So, welcome everybody. Welcome to this seminar, Right to the Land, or Right to Land. This is the first seminar in our arena that is held in English, so bear with us. My name is Andreas, and I work here at the Swedish Tenants Union. And I'm just gonna briefly go through the essentials. Toilets, bathrooms, down that corner, and escape ways is the same way, or back here, or where you came in. This seminar will be streamed, so there's a camera. And if you're gonna ask a question later on, you have to wait for the microphone, or otherwise will be very hard for the viewers to hear the questions. This seminar is held, I guess, by idéburen gemensam bostadsförsörjning, which I'm not gonna try to say in English. And from there we have Tina Harling from Egnahemsfabriken, who is gonna guide us through this evening. Tina, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Andreas. And please, if you don't want to be filmed, we have people online. We have a streaming version, but we also have John here, who is a filmer. Tell John afterwards that you would like not to be a part of the film, because we are filming this evening. So, as Andreas just said, this seminar is part of the project, which is a research project, idéburen and gemensam bostadsförsörjning. And that is founded by Formas. And this is really hard speaking English, having a microphone on yourself in the same time, sorry. Where the Swedish Union of Tenants are participating together with Coompanion in Gothenburg as well as in Östergötland. The University of Gothenburg, which is also project leaders of this, it's Jonas Lagander and Jan Henrik Keying. It's the Municipality of Orust and also Egnahemsfabriken and me, Tina Harling. And tonight we will listen to a presentation by Martin Large, who I will soon introduce. And Martin will talk for about an hour, and then we will have a short pause in 10 minutes and end up with a panel discussion where we will explore the issue from different perspectives, and there will also be time for questions by the audience here. And as Andreas said, we always need to put questions in the mic so the audience who are online will hear it all. And with that said, I will first introduce very shortly myself and then the keynote for tonight, Martin. So I'm an architect and one of the founders of Egnahemsfabriken at Tjörn. I'm also a board member of a national association which is called Föreningen för bygggemenskaper, and also I coordinate the national conference Idéburet and socialt byggande. And that in English, Martin, would be collaborative and social building and living. But also I'm a part of this research project. With that said, Martin, I will try to introduce you. And when I do that, you can please come up and stand here next to me. And Martin would not call himself an expert on garden cities, but you did help convene a Letchworth Garden City conference with colleagues. And also you co-edited Common Sense, Cooperative Placemaking and the Capturing of Land Value for 21st Century Garden Cities, which is not bad. Besides that, you are an academic, a publisher, a facilitator, and you did found Stroud Common Wealth in 1999 to enable community land trust and social business development. And I must say, you're also a friend of a dear friend of mine. I'm so curious to hear what you are going to tell us tonight. And thank you so much for coming such a long way to be here tonight. The scene is now all yours.
Can you hear me? No. Does this hear me? Okay. Technology is the answer, but what's the question? So thank you very much for the invite to this great city of Gothenburg. Wonderful to be here. I think I hitchhiked here in 1968. It's a bit dimly in memory, and took a ship over to Hull and loved it then. So this is a welcome opportunity to learn from you and exchange about the land question, which is a huge question, and also to support, where's Jonas there, to support his launch this morning of his great paper, Community Land Trusts. This is the Google Translate, Community Land Trusts and Other Land Communities. Is that the correct title, Jonas? How many people were here for his presentation? Yeah, well, it's really, really great paper. And if my voice dries up, Jonas can take over because he knows all about this. And it's great writing. It's brilliant. It fills gaps in the history and the story. It gives a good analysis of community land trusts and great options and openings for Sweden. And I really hope, is there a journalist in the audience? You really need a good journalist. That's what we learnt in one of the things we learnt in our land trust project, because there's a danger of being a geek, isn't there? If that translates. And so it really deserves to become part of a national debate here. And I hope it results in some pilots, schemes to learn from and develop. So blessings. I'm a publisher in another life, and I have 18 Swedish books in English called Petson and Findus. We're the English publisher of and the global English publisher of Petson and Findus. And I love all the old tools and his connection with the land, because it's like my father, because I'm from the Yorkshire Dales, from a farming family. And that's how I first came across land rights, because we had the right to graze sheep on the hill, although we didn't own the hill. We could graze 200 sheep, and I learnt my cooperative skills in a caring and sharing farm economy, borrowing bulls, borrowing tractors, you name it. People even borrowed their coffins when they died. It's supposed to be a joke. So, however, talking about land communities and housing, I feel it's a bit like bringing coals to Newcastle, or as the Dutch say, bringing water to the sea. There's such a lot of good practice going on in Sweden. Like you've got, is it 60 co-housing communities? All sorts of really good things going on to learn from. And is it 20% cooperative homes here? Have I got the figure right? Depends what you mean by cooperative homes. And there's less than 1% in the UK, yeah? And there's exemplar models, like my granddaughter lives in Hammarby Sjöstad. Did I pronounce it correctly? She's 9 years old, and she skips out of her ground floor flat to school, which is 400 meters away. There's a tram, there's community facilities, there's play space, there's gardens. It's quite extraordinarily family friendly, and it's a credit to your planning, housing, architect, urban design, So and people go there from all over Europe, and a colleague in Stroud Common Wealth has visited to write it up. So, I feel very humble here. And so just to talk about, I'm not an expert, but I've done a lot, though I do come from more than 50 miles away, right? Does that qualify? And the trouble is with land, as Mark Twain said, they're not making it anymore. Even the Dutch are losing land, aren't they? They might lose a third of their land by the end of the century, if some gloomy global warming predictions are accurate. So, and also the trouble with land, it's the mother of all monopolies, as Winston Churchill said. Very difficult to deal with, particular with the way we think now. So, the story of how I got interested in this is that our Cotswold town, Stroud, in west of England, in the 90s was rather a run-down town, small town, mill town, manufacturing cloth. And we did a community planning process, a group of facilitators. We visioned the future of the town. There was a group of us interested in drama, about 90 of us, and we needed a theatre. And the local council, please stop me if I use words that you're unfamiliar with, the local council, the local authority, the local government, were selling off this church. Instead of leasing it to us for £1, they forced us to buy it, which was a big mountain to climb. But we raised the money from a mortgage and gifts and loans and so on, and soon we had it up and running. And today it's thriving, and you can't get a booking there, even if you ask 6 months ahead. It's so busy. So it's a real success. And we thought, well, if we regenerate the town, all sorts of interesting entrepreneurs, artists, creative people will come. I call it the St. Ives effect. It's a thing, isn't it? So we developed a community, a social enterprise, a social business development centre, which we call the Exchange, after Robert Owen, the cooperative pioneer, to facilitate social business. And we also held a Land for People conference. Not land for the people, that has connotations, but land for people. And people came from all over, the most amazing people, with all sorts of issues, farming, housing, holiday areas where there was no housing, all that sort of thing. And 2 or 3 people came, and we talked about community land trusts as a potential solution. So I got interested, and I applied for a Winston Churchill travelling scholarship. And I went around America for a couple of months, and I visited Burlington, Vermont. And 2 colleagues who were ex-Housing Association chief executives and I, and 1 or 2 other people, we developed a project called Capturing Value for Rural Communities. And we looked at Scotland, at the Scottish land reform movement, the buyouts of islands and highlands. We looked at Letchworth, and we discovered that there was a cooperative land society that was at the basis of Letchworth Garden City. And a lot of the community land trust principles were there already, but they'd been forgotten and reinvented in the United States in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And we found lots of really good examples hidden away. So that's a method. I really recommend. It's called the Back to the Future method. Yeah. If you want to go forward, you look back in your heritage and, oopsie boys, you at least it wasn't the Semler. This was given to me earlier in the day, and I don't know what to do with it. I think somebody's going to film me eating it. Anyway, it's a treat for later. So we did this. We made recommendations. That we got funding from government. We had a partnership with a university, with housing associations, with government, with civil society, and an excellent working group. And we got funding to develop successive national demonstration projects to pilot exemplars. Because how do you contextualize American law, American housing, American CLTs into Britain? We have this weird thing called the common law, which you wouldn't understand. Are you Napoleon? French law? No? But anyway, it's if you establish a precedent, like I'm a terrorist. Do you realize I'm a terrorist? I'm accused by the British government of supporting a terrorist organization. So there's 2,700 of us have been arrested for supporting Palestine Action, who've been campaigning against arms firms peacefully. And common law will be made if juries find in our favour to defend the right to process and right to freedom. It's bottom-up lawmaking. So British law is, in terms of housing law, we had to contextualise it to set these precedents. And I'll talk about that later, about legal forms. So we got a few pilot projects going, handbook, resources, technical assistance, working with government, working with political parties, and action research is you create the road as you travel. Have you come across that phrase? Or seat of the pants, as it's known, but all sorts of things emerge. So one fantastic early CLT was in Cornwall. Cornwall is one of the poorest areas of Europe, and there's a huge inequality between the wealthy tourist areas and the other areas of Cornwall. And in a high demand tourist area where local people couldn't live and work, a farmer sold some land to Cornwall Community Land Trust, which was new, and Cornwall Rural Housing Association. He sold it at agricultural price. That's £10,000 an acre or so. I don't know what it was then. And as soon as you give development planning, of course, it goes to 1 million acre. And so that land was put into the land trust and is forever secure. And it was self-built, so there's 20 self-built homes there, and 20 families could get a mortgage to build their houses with the security of a 99-year lease. So it's absolutely brilliant. And politicians loved it. Politicians love stories. And this was a very, very good story indeed. Self-help, initiative, green, and it was so that was an early win. Urban areas are much more complicated. And as a result of that, we proved the concept with these few pilots and then developed the National Community Land Trust Network with technical assistance, advocacy, and the 2010 government eventually set up a community land fund to fund community land trusts doing housing projects. So I then left and I did a side hustle in developing developing community farmland trusts, because we were interested in farmland trusts. And we brought a lot of our learning together in the Letchworth Garden City Report 2013, Cooperative Placemaking and the Capturing of Land Value for 21st Century Garden Cities. So that's in the references, and it's a mine of good things in patches, because we thought it was really good to get all the people similarly engaged together to build on that platform. So that's my story. So there's a health warning about this talk. Beware of my enthusiasm. I hope my voice lasts, and I'll stop for questions. Is that okay? Is that okay? And you can still hear me? So firstly, housing and how we live is a huge issue. And it's good to look at the context, of that. So I'm going to... Is that... oh, thank you very much. Right. So first I'll look at societal challenges and look at society as a commonwealth. That's the context for housing and how we live. Secondly, reimagining land. Is it a commodity, a bundle of rights, or a commons, or are all correct? A bit on the what, why, and how of community land trusts. I'd like to show you what it results in. So I'd like to show you our community in Stroud and all the strange things going on there. How long do you have? We'll look at a short film, the Letchworth Garden City story, and capturing value, and a local project we're trying to influence using that thinking. And discussion, how relevant and useful is it for Sweden, and there may be questions. So now, is there a? Where is the? Oh, there is. Thank you very much. Thank you. So just very briefly, from a strategic point of view, what challenges are we facing? What are the fundamental questions we're facing? And there's all sorts of phenomena going on, which you can see from this image. And you can crystallize, one way of crystallizing them is inequality, rising inequality, the nature, the climate crisis, and the growing military-industrial government and even intellectual complex that's fueling wars around the planet, which is very, very concerning. And just to look at the inequality, I was shocked to realize that Sweden was the most equal country in 1979, and Britain was the second most equal country. Can you imagine? And now we're way down the list in terms of inequality. Kate Wilkinson, Wilkinson and Pickett in the Spirit level said unbelievably that the health of poor people in Sweden is equivalent to the health of rich people in Britain. Isn't that extraordinary as a comparison? I won't go into their argument, it's in the Spirit level. But you know, isn't that amazing? There were 40% of people in Britain lived in social housing. That's local authority, council housing, government housing. 40%. Now it's 16%. There's been 40 or 50 years systematic efforts to dismantle what you would call a social democratic social order, yeah? And it's been quite astonishing what's happening. So now there's a third of the council or local authority houses were sold off at big discounts. It was ideological. It was part of Thatcher's project, and it's resulted in a third of those going into private rentals, with ever rising rents, and you know, many people spending half or even 2/3 of their income on that sort of rent. So a lot of people leading precarious lives, and of course. That fuels populism, doesn't it? Yeah, so it's very easy for the anti-immigrants and all that to prey on that, because genuinely there's not enough public housing, affordable social housing. So our dysfunctional housing market, I won't go on about it, you probably know more about it than I do. But that's the social challenges, and from how do we develop move from an extractive economy to an economy that works for everybody, that respects the needs for the planet? That's the economic question. How do we develop a democracy that's participative, inclusive, peaceful, respects differences, deeply grounded in human rights, all those sorts of things? That's a huge question. As Gandhi might have said, democracy is a good idea, kind of, you know. But it's a real question. How do we develop a vibrant cultural system, education, health, science, the arts, community, family, where every individual can develop their potential and maintain their potential? And the fourth question is, how do we look after the planet? And so, just to summarize, we face the choice of capitalism or a cooperative commonwealth. It's an old trope. Do we want a capitalist, free market dominated society or a cooperative commonwealth society? And this has huge implications for society, doesn't it? How do we cooperate together? How do we collaborate together? And this is a map we use in Stroud Commonwealth. The next image. It's a bit complicated, and I won't go into too much, but it's a map of the intersecting cultural, political, and economic spaces resting on Mother Earth, the planet, and it's a dynamic picture, and we can use it for also understanding housing, and capture. We see a lot of capture, like in America, Bernie Sanders wants to get money out of politics because he says the big corporations, the broligarchs, have captured the political system, the federal political system anyway, perhaps not cities and states. And he said we need to reform campaign funding and reclaim government from the corporations. We need to rebalance. Think what civil society did to rebalance in Eastern Europe in 1989 against the communist social order. And this is Tenants speaking here. Have you heard of Joanna Kuciak? She's a German Cambridge academic, lawyer, and she's one of the people in Deutsche Wohnen. Have you come across this? Berlin City sold off 250,000 homes at low prices, 6,000 to a Swedish millionaire, apparently. And these, people, of course, invested in these houses, good investment, and there's a Deutsche Wohnung movement because they want to reclaim these and socialize them, nationalize them, and put them into social ownership. So it's a big movement. They won a referendum. I don't know about the result of the second referendum, but they draw on the basic law, Article 14. Property should be used for the public good. How about that for a constitution? I think there's a few more qualifications. And secondly, the Article 15 said land may, for the purposes of socialization, be transferred to public ownership of other forms of public enterprise. It's amazing, isn't it, to have a constitution like that? But of course, the people, that movement in Berlin, need to contest with the authorities. Of course, left-leaning parties and Greens support it, and the established parties perhaps not. But that's what I mean by rebalancing society. You know, we need a balance. And I think if you come from a social democratic country, there's more of a sort of unholy alliance between business and the state, business and statutory sectors. And the community sector or civil society or the creative sector is rather squeezed out. Yeah? And they make us buy things, you know? And it's sort of, anyway, I could go on about that. But it's all about partnerships and how we use these. We Stroud Common Wealth, we convene three-way dialogues and conversations about the wicked questions and issues facing our community. So if you get business in the room and people from the statutory sector and a wealth of civil society people, you have a very interesting dialogue. Yeah, and that's how we use that. And also with community land trusts, when you design the governance, it's good to have people from these three sectors as well as users on the board. So it brings the energies of the three sectors into your organization. So that's a bit about our, the background. So let's set sail on reimagining land. They're not making it anymore. What happens when you treat land like a commodity? Karl Polanyi was very interested in how fascism rose so quickly in the 1920s and 30s. He wrote a book called The Great Transformation. And he argued that if there are no labor rights, and if there's deregulated capital, think of the shadow banking system, think of secrecy jurisdictions, think of tax havens, think of all that, how capital is just, commoditized, and think of land as a commodity, and people don't have secure housing. It results in absolute insecurity, which of course is a gift for populists. And his book, The Great Transformation, he said that the first time in the 1920s and 30s, there was pushback from civil society, from trade unions, cultural groups, all sorts of things that resulted in the 1945 to 80 period of the mixed economy. That pushed back. But now neoliberal economics and capitalism has recreated this absolute insecurity. And behind all the populism is this feeling of insecurity and precarity, and it's a difficult world. Just to remind you of your traditions, the Sami. I went to a wonderful exhibition of the Sami, and they said, "Let the mountain be, let the river be." So there's these. You've got indigenous traditions to draw on here. And before 1066, before the Normans arrived in Britain, we had similar practices in Britain, customary land usage, in Anglo-Saxon times. But with the feudal system, believe it or not, 15% of England and Wales, I don't know about Scotland, is still owned by people who came with William of Normandy in 1066. Can you imagine? Yes, feudalism survives. Our land trust group informally called ourselves the 2066 group because we wanted to reverse what the Normans had done, right? I don't think we've been very successful. And then along came enclosures and privatization, which is ongoing. And of course, there was pushback on that from the diggers who said the earth shall be a common treasure for us all. They got imprisoned for digging where they shouldn't dig in enclosed land. And along comes Eleanor Ostrom, I think she's the only female Nobel Prize winner for economics. Pardon? The first one. Is there another one? Right, good. And she said, far from the commons being tragic, i.e. degrading if farmers put more and more sheep on them, which was a justification for the privatization of common resources, actually Indian fisher people and stewards and shepherds in the Alps looked after pastures and common resources for hundreds of years very successfully. It's a stable system of governance. And so she defined a commons as a group of people, a set of rules, and a resource that you use for commoning. Yeah, and that translates to community land trusts governance. And finally, I love this from the American naturalist, and I've suggested to Jonas this might be one of a land ethic for your land community. He said, when we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. So, but what of land as a bundle of rights? So if you buy a flat or rent a flat, there's a whole load of rights as a legal document. It's actually a bundle of rights that you have to sign up to. And just in simple terms, here's Minchinhampton Common near Stroud, 2 or 3 hectares, 100 hectares of common land. But it's actually owned by the National Trust, which is a kind of national community land and property trust. It's got 5 million members. It's democratic. It's, one member, one vote. It gets donated land, donated stately homes, looks after coastlines, and it was given Minchinhampton Common. My Uncle Howie is American. He was an American millionaire, and he's totally confused by Minchinhampton Common. There's no fences. Yeah. So when the Pilgrim fathers turned up and mothers turned up in Cape Cod, the Massasoit, this Indian Native American person, was very confused because they were putting up fences and calling the land theirs. It belongs to the Great Spirit, doesn't it? Anyway, so the National Trust owned the freehold, and there's a Commons Association that governs it. A lot of them are farmers. And there's a bundle of rights, to play golf, to walk, graze kites, fly kites, etc. I mean, one of the big issues, of course, is restrictions on cars. They can drive on roads there, but they've got to drive slowly, and they don't, and that injures the cows. That's a big issue. So that's an example of a commons. And unlike an open pool resource that doesn't have governance, and things like our air and our ocean, there's quite a lot of resources that are open pool resources with very little governance, and that's an issue. And just think of Norway. Do you ever get concerned about letting the Norwegians have independence? Do you ever get concerned? I've just recently been in Norway. It's quite extraordinary. They've, like you, they got the right to walk everywhere, don't they? Respectfully, which is a commons, kind of commons. And then they look after their fish, a 200-mile limit. That was one reason they didn't join the EU, I think, so they could steward their fish rather than loads of people fishing there. They got a sovereign wealth fund. They built 5,000 bridges. They've built infrastructure, haven't they? They've built up their commons and quite consciously drawn on their traditions. And Equinor is a state oil company, etc. So they harvest profits, dividends, as well as taxes on that. I'm not sure about how the planet and carbon fits in with that. They're 100% renewable, Norway, aren't they? But you know, there is an issue. And the test for their Commonwealth, I was recently there, and I got into conversation with these two groups of girls, 13, 12-year-old girls. I don't know why they made for me. Perhaps it's because I was friendly. Anyway, there was these three girls, and one of them looked Somali heritage. She had a hijab, and she said, one was Indian heritage and one was another African heritage background. And one of them said, "Arigato." I think that's Japanese for hello, isn't it? So I said, I think she's 13. So I said konnichiwa, which is thank you. And then we fell about laughing. And then it turned out that one of the other girls was studying Mandarin. So they could speak perfect English. It's not extraordinary. They're obviously very well educated. They were self-confident. Their families obviously loved them. Their teachers obviously respected them. And I thought, that's amazing Commonwealth, isn't it? Amazing test of it. They're happy. Yeah. Anyway, so just that. Do you see that little diagram there with the house and the land? This thing about a bundle of rights and the commons and the commodities used by land trusts. One concept is the land is the house is a kind of commodity. It wears out. It needs repairing, constant attention, etc. Building, but the land is a commons, and that's held by the land trust. And the right to use the land is leased to the body running housing or the individual leaseholder. Yeah, so that's a roundabout way of going into the meat of the presentation, which is the why, the what, and the how of community land trusts. And so basically it's a civil society community response to market and state failure to provide housing, particularly in hotspot areas. And the market is not delivering, particularly on housing that's needed, rental housing, and also the state is not stepping up to the mark in Britain. There's a lack of affordable social housing, and people want to do something about their particular community and also capture assets for their community and capture the land value and rent for enduring community benefit and for reinvesting the surplus. Basically, they've learnt from the Duke of Westminster, who was one of those 1066 Normans that came with William the Conqueror. And he still holds on to large chunks of Cheshire and London, and he's one of the richest people in Britain. And he never sells land, he only ever leases it and rents it. Yeah, because he knows that the enduring benefits of rental income, leasehold income, development, uplift is really worth it. So community land trusts are trying to do that sort of thing for neighborhoods, villages, towns. And the Americans are very keen on this one. It's also a way of investing state subsidies into permanently affordable part-time housing. Housing is so ideologically driven, isn't it? And there's so little advice taken from land economists on the unforeseen consequences of back of cigarette packet policies. So one of those policies in Britain recently was help to buy. So that was £30 billion spent on helping. There's a gap between, for first-time house buyers, there's a gap between what they can afford, the mortgage they can afford, and the market price of the house. So the last government said, we'll have a help to buy program to bridge that gap. Isn't that a wonderful idea? What did that result in? Any answers? They immediately went up and countered the effect of that. One of the results was that one of the house builders' chief executives got a bonus of 100 million that year. Can you imagine? Crest Nicholson. So, ill-conceived things, but CLTs are ways of capturing subsidies. And I think it's at least 200 billion has been value has been privatised by council and government social housing sales. It's absolutely massive. And also the people who would have been renting social housing, those in most needs, have to be housed in bed and breakfast at high costs by local authorities. You know, it's unbelievable. It's sort of, you know, when you look at it as a whole system. And also community land trusts, there's nothing wrong with private ownership, but community land trusts, community land ownership offer a third alternative in many forms. How are we doing? Is that okay? Are you brain dead yet? Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, so what's a community land trust? Well, it's a democratic, one member, one vote body, and member participation, and its organisation own and develop land and property for community benefit. There's a big discussion about land and property which stands on the land, you know. You've got some community land and property trusts and some pure community land trusts, you know. So it's you know, there's a big debate about that. So it provides land access for a whole range of things. Pubs are very, very important, yeah. So there's lots of community buyouts of pubs. You know, that's I think a couple of hundred, and it's all. And one of the benefits of this is people learn how to do it. Communities have got lots of skills, but you know, participative skills, management skills, housing management skills, administration, all that sort of stuff. People learn how to do it, and it protects community assets forever. Now I'll go on to talk about the legal structures in the next slide. Yeah. So they're not a legal structure in themselves. Serendipitously, because there were some cooperative lords in our House of Landlords, there were 10,000 acts of enclosure, at least 10,000 in the 18th century and 19th century that went through the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Anyway, that's why I call it the House of Landlords. Anyway, two cooperative lords managed to get this definition into a housing act. And so community land trust isn't a legal form per se, but it's defined in terms of principles. So it's got to benefit people in a community of place. So it's a place-based entity. There's community of interest. That could be a national body, like a farming body. It's not for private profit, and the surplus is reinvested. There's open membership to the people living in a community if they subscribe to the aims and principles. And it's democratic participation. Members can call special general meetings and vote in annual general meetings. And the board needs careful designing with different stakeholders as well as users. And that's an issue. And it's also an issue for succession, because the early enthusiasts to get these things going, what happens in 20 or 30 years' time? That's a big issue. Come back to that later. Now, there's non-profit legal structures. My favourite is the Community Benefit Society, which used to be called the Industrial Providence Society. There were worker cooperatives, various forms of worker cooperatives, and there was also this family of cooperatives called the Industrial and Providence Society. The original articles were written up by the philosopher John Stuart Mill, who was a member of Parliament. So his question was, how do you balance enterprise and initiative, that's industry, with providence, the community benefit? Do you see what I mean? It's a kind of balance, isn't it? How do you develop community asset owning bodies? So that and that's been redefined as a community benefit society, and it's perfect for owning assets and for devising governance and for raising community shares. Do you have community shares in Sweden? Do you know what a community share is? Oh. Well, people didn't know much about it in 2004 in Britain either, because it was done in the 19th century when you wanted to raise capital for a building or community building. You developed an industrial and providence society, and people gave loans to it, and they also invested in transferable shares. So you'd buy £100 worth of £1 shares. And so anyway, so my housing colleagues on the land trust thing didn't know about this. They had different legal forms, different mutual legal forms, and this was a side hustle. Stroud Common Wealth, we helped support Stroud Community Agriculture, which is a cooperative, a member cooperative, about 200 or 300 members, consumer cooperative, and the model is they engage with farmers and gardeners, agree an annual growing plan and an annual budget, and then guarantee the wages of the farmers for a year through shares. Now there's various versions of this, going from a box scheme, which you're probably familiar with here. You have box schemes delivered to your door every week. Happens in Stockholm. Yeah, to farmer-led ones, and this is a cooperative-led one. And this was one of the first to get going in this country. Various CSAs, as they're called, community-supported agriculture projects, said, what about our land? We're organic, we're biodynamic, we're regenerative. We need land, secure land, for a long time to build up the fertility. So Stroud Common Wealth, we got some funding for this, and Greg and I, who now, you can't get him out of Stroud Brewery, which he started up, which is very successful, a B Corporation business, but we got funding to develop community farmland trusts. And one of our projects was a young farmer called Ben, age 19, his sister Charlotte Hollins, 21, 22, brilliant communicator, brilliant young people, 123 acre heritage organic farm. It was being sold from under their feet by the estate. They were fourth generation. And they asked us to help. And we said, yes, we can help. We'll try a community buyout, which was relatively unknown at that time. And we engaged with all their community groups, stakeholders, women's groups, health, education, you name it, farmers groups, and we told the story of the farm, and people got really fired up. And so Charlotte said, okay, what legal form can we use for this? And so I said this Industrial Providence Society would help. She said she wanted a structure for participation, for member involvement, for responsibility and investment. So I phoned up the tax person and said, if we register this, will these rules be charitable? If they're charitable, if you give a donation, you get 25% more from the government. Do you have that system here? It's called gift aid. So if you give £100 to a charity, the government will add £25 to it. Also, you don't have to pay tax when you buy land. So there are certain advantages in being that body. And fortunately, the Industrial Providence Society model had a charitable stream as well, but it was a self-help charitable stream. So that worked, and 6 months later, there were 3,000 people who'd invested £800,000. Can you imagine? It's quite extraordinary, and it was these young people who did it. And in the Financial Times on the 1st of February, there's a brilliant article called Take Over the Town. The UK government aims to double the size of the cooperative sector. Can community ownership successfully scale up? It's a brilliant article, not for geeks, just for ordinary folk, really well written. And they wrote up Fordall Farm. And that legal form, the Community Benefit Society, whether charitable or non-charitable, is used for energy cooperatives, and farms, all sorts of things now, and for housing. So that's my preferred option. But it's an interesting story, isn't it, when you do action research? And the government picked this up, particularly the Conservative government, and they spruced up the Industrial Providence Society into a community benefit society. And the community of benefit is not just members, that's a traditional cooperative, but it's also the wider community. Yeah, so you've got to show wider community benefit to the authorities as well. So, shall we have a look at a video as a summary? Is that okay? Will it work? Here we go.
In villages, towns and cities across the country, ordinary people are creating new futures for themselves, brick by brick.
How much time?
Community land trusts, or CLTs, are democratic, not-for-profit organisations which own, develop and look after land and assets for the benefit of their communities to meet local need. Many CLTs start with affordable housing for local people in areas where they've been priced out or left behind, making them affordable for every future occupier and keeping them in community hands forever. Sometimes it's just a few houses, or it could be hundreds or even thousands. But it's not just homes. CLTs can take on anything important to the community. Businesses like shops or pubs, communal land for meadows and wildlife, or even energy schemes. Anyone can start a CLT in their community. Many work in partnership with developers, housing associations, their local council or landowners to meet what the community wants or needs. And that's the magic of CLTs. Because the community are in control, CLTs can do things that others can't. At the Community Land Trust Network, we want to see a CLT in every area that wants one, and we want government and business to partner with them to make this a reality. CLTs are changing the country, so get stuck in.
Any questions so far? Any questions of fact or clarification? No?
Jag tror vi har en fråga här, så jag tänker att jag tar den i micken. Och då tänker jag lite kort nu. Vi har en kvart kvar av presentationen ungefär.
So I take it in English, yes?
Yeah, thank you.
In Sweden we have a concept which is called välgörenhetsorganisation. And I ask you if this is the same in some respect.
No, I wouldn't say that. The question was whether this is more kind of, charity organization. And I would say that it's not, but I would let you answer. Is this a charity organization?
In Britain, we have two families of charities. The first top-down one started by Elizabeth I for education, science, helping the poor, all that. But the cooperative charitable stream is self-help based on initiative. So even though for the Community Benefit Society we got charity at law status with all the benefits of those charities, we don't have the baggage. Does that make sense? We do. Okay, just to continue, these are some of the community land trusts we've got going. London, Stroud, we've got 3, Eastington, Applewood and Nailsworth. It helps really with Nailsworth if the local authority gives you the land. You still need subsidy, £67,000 for each of the 10 homes in Nailsworth. You still need subsidy. And the figures there, I think they may be up to date. 548 community land trusts established, 728 projects, and 1965 homes, which I didn't think was that many, but there's quite a few in the pipeline. However, when you think about the resistance to community land trusts from, conventional economics and conventional policy, it's still quite an achievement, and it can be scaled up. Particularly, one of the success factor is when a local authority takes the lead and uses it, as in Cambridgeshire. So Cambridgeshire is a growth area with the university, and East Cambridgeshire District Council is very, very keen on CLTs because they steward the place, the common spaces, the facilities, they provide forever affordable housing, and their scheme, this particular scheme in Kennet Garden Village, there's funding from the developer and from management fees. So that's one way of scaling them up, because it's quite an uphill battle, especially as we've had austerity since 2010, with local authority budgets being cut, and there's not much housing finance around. So now for another story, something completely different. Who's a fan of Scotland here? Yeah. So have you been to some of the Highlands and Islands and heard about the things happening there? Well, about 200 people own 2/3 of the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. Can you imagine? Not very democratic, is it? There were feudal land tenures and all sorts of things like that. Depopulation, schools losing their children, or issues about jobs. And of course, a lot of that land was cleared for the sake of sheep or deer, big estates. And so that sort of colonial heritage survives there, shall we say. And in the 1990s, there was a social movement by crofters, farmers, fishermen in 3 areas, and the egg community buyout was quite spectacular. It's quite near Skye, and there was a Yorkshire millionaire bought it. These islands are millionaires' playthings, And he used to cruise around very slowly. I think there was only about 80 people on the island in his yellow Rolls Royce. Very slowly, because there were many potholes, And the island was depopulating, and there's a whole saga. And eventually the community got fed up with his successor, and they set up the Isle of Egg Heritage Trust with the local authority, and they did a community buyout, and a philanthropist read about it in the newspaper and gave them quite a lot of money for the buyout. So that led to pressure on the new Scottish government to pass land reform acts and to set up the Scottish Land Fund money and technical assistance from the Highlands and Islands Enterprise Board, energy as well as land and all sorts of things. They brought in the right to roam, and since then they've put about 200,000 hectares into social land ownership of various sorts. So it's regenerated lots of communities, saved schools, saved services, and planted lots of trees, One person said Scotland was miles and miles of bugger all. That was because it had been cleared for sheep and deer, So you now see all sorts of things happening there. And so I've got a brief. There's now 810, I think, buyouts, successful ones. And here's just a clip. I hope this works as well.
In villages,
Here we go. Thanks to Andreas. Does it work? One more time. Thank you for your technical support. Yeah. So this is the Isle of Lewis in the Hebrides.
I've lived on an estate that was privately owned and is now purchased by the community and is community owned. And I also work as a development officer on a brand new community owned estate for the Carlow Estate Trust. So I started with them just over a year ago, and it's been very challenging, very exciting, and I've greatly enjoyed it. I was born and brought up in Galston Estate in the northwest coast of the Isle of Lewis. It was a privately owned estate, but they didn't influence us in any way. They weren't good landlords, they weren't bad landlords, but they were faceless. I couldn't have told you who they were, and they didn't influence my life in any shape or form. And then something happened. There was a planned turbine project on the estate, and that was the shift for us. Nothing to do with stopping the turbine. That was going to happen. That deal was done, but it was the realisation that that wasn't our land, that wasn't our moorland, they weren't our crofts. We didn't get to choose. Somebody else made that decision. So for now, in the last 10 years of my life, it's changed, and that is our land. We do own it. We do get a say. We do get to control it. If a community were thinking about buying the land, I would go and visit other communities who've done it. Really important to go and see others and see what they've done, and access as much support as you can. Join Community Land Scotland, meet other groups who are doing the same, speak to HIE, look into the Scottish Land Fund and what's required, but most importantly, go for it, be confident. I'm now there as an adult, living on that land, as a croft tenant, as a grazing clerk, but nobody can come in and make decisions that you don't get a say on. It's now your land and our land. And I think that's immensely important, because I think you grew up believing that, and then something happened to make you realise it wasn't true, and now you know it is ours.
Yeah. Is that one? Could you understand that? They say they speak good English up there. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll skip the top facts, but it's an interesting example of land reform. However, it's not going fast enough for many of the Scots, and a lot more could be done. So what does it, just a brief snapshot, because we need to go on to have a look at the Garden City film. What does all this mean for a community? Well, if I look back 25 years in Stroud, and now we've got a very, very vibrant, creative civil society, and all sorts of things are happening through securing affordable land and property access through a variety of bodies. So we've got a thriving arts centre, several hundred artists, you wouldn't believe it, galleries, international artists, local artists, Stroud Valley Art Space being the anchor body for getting all that going. I founded the Biodynamic Land Trust in 2011, and there's Oakbrook Community Farm on the top left, and we raised the money to buy that in 2015, I think it was, and now it's a platform for all sorts of regenerative initiatives, Stroud Community Agriculture, Zero Dig, a home education charity with 60 children, the food hubs. Do you have food hubs here? Do you have food poverty here? About 15% of people in Britain really can't afford much food through lack of money. And it's a stopgap measure, but the food hubs provide food, and some of the food comes from the community farm. Down there at the bottom is under the Grove, that's Stroud Co-housing, 34-member, the first new build co-housing in Britain. Very challenging, but the first is always the most difficult, and now that's spreading. On the top right, that's our exchange, our social enterprise, an NGO development workspace. And underneath there, do you see the red carpets on the green background? Stroud Common Wealth recently bought those fields with the community, because those bits of red are red cloth milled in Stroud mills for redcoats and soldiers throughout the world. That's part of our heritage, and that's where they were dried, yeah? And so we thought it was worth buying that as green space, of course, to prevent development as well. So there's all sorts of things going on, and on the bottom left-hand corner, all those people there, that's our latest community buyout, the Heavens Farm. Believe it or not, it's called the Heavens. So it's a 100-acre farm, and the local communities there, abutting Stroud, raised £1 million to buy that. It's a huge mountain to climb, and they were helped by a charitable trust. And so we've got a ring of regenerative farms, and around Stroud. There's also several community woodlands, 2 run by a community cooperative, and one by a village group, in conjunction with Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust, which again is a wildlife land trust. Okay, so it looks quite bewildering, doesn't it? And one or two people in the statutory sector, in the local authority, say that it gives them a headache. I met the chief executive about 10 years ago. He said, "Martin, I went down to Bristol at a meeting, and they were saying I had all these arts groups from Stroud wanting money. Why don't they get together and do something together?" And I said, I think that's your job, actually. Anyway, yes, so it gave him a headache. And the last story is the long table. and they are a food hub, and they distribute food, free food meals, a social enterprise hub, and they created huge value in this dilapidated warehouse, and the owner then thought, aha, they created value, I'm going to evict them. Okay? And so he gave them 3 months. I don't know, there was 30, 40 jobs there, and lots of people benefited from it. Anyway, James Bond stepped in the shape of Daniel Craig. He had heard about it, and he donated, I think, 30 or 40,000 to help with costs, just like that, out of the blue. And then a benefactor bought the whole place in the end and has leased it to them on a very long lease at a cheap rent. So it's a good story, isn't it? But once you get the snowball rolling, things start happening. Anyway, so that's just a brief glimpse. It's a bit busy, isn't it? Okay, so lastly, can Letchworth Garden City, shall we have a look at this? The principles, I think, are carved deeply into many of you, aren't they? You've all read about Letchworth, but this is a brief video that reminds us of the simplicity and wisdom of Ebenezer Howard, who tried to capture the uplift in land value from buying agricultural land for developing a garden city. So okay.
Letchworth Garden City today is a beautiful and unique town, an example to architects and planners all over the world, and a pleasure to live in. But how did the world's first garden city come about? Garden cities were the idea of social reformer Ebenezer Howard, not a big self-important industrial philanthropist, but a modest man working as a parliamentary reporter. Howard saw firsthand and read endless reports about the terrible living conditions prevailing in the country's cities and towns, and he read voraciously the works of utopian idealists like Thomas More, Henry George and Edward Bellamy, as well as seeing the precursors to his garden city idea, the industrial villages at Port Sunlight in 1888 and Bourneville in 1895. Howard didn't have a eureka moment in a bathtub, but rather soaked up all that he saw and read and put together his unique combination of proposals in a book, Tomorrow, A Peaceful Path to Real Reform, which he published in 1898. In it he wrote,
"Town and country must be married, and out of this joyous union will spring new hope, a new life, a new civilization."
Howard proposed that garden cities would combine the best aspects of town and country with all of the opportunities but none of the problems that each afforded. A network of these smokeless, slumless cities could be built to give everyone the benefits of his idea. Each city would be split into zones with proportions set out for industry, green space, housing and commerce. As we can see from this slice of the model, with jam factories, housing, a crystal palace for shopping and leisure, and grand institutes surrounding plentiful parkland. The other key element of the Garden City vision was the reinvestment model, where the profits from rents were reinvested in the town for the benefit of the people. In 1899, Howard formed the Garden City Association to help gain support for his idea. In 1902, his book was republished as Garden Cities of Tomorrow, and the Garden City Pioneer Company Limited was founded with the aim of finding a site to actually build this social experiment. By 1903, land had been found in Hertfordshire, and First Garden City Limited was formed to build and run the town. Only 5 years after the publication of his book, Ebenezer Howard, at the age of just 53, had seen his plans come to fruition here in Letchworth Garden City. At the official opening of the estate on the 9th of October 1903, Earl Grey said,
"I think Mr. Ebenezer Howard is greatly to be congratulated upon the fact that within 5 short years, his visionary hopes for tomorrow have become the almost fulfilled realisation of today."
Howard, of course, was a social reformer, not a town planner, and he needed someone to transform his ideas into a practical design on the ground. He appointed Raymond Unwin and Barry Parker, 2 arts and crafts architects from Buxton in Derbyshire, and they drew up this master plan for the new garden city. It features several of the key ideas that Howard had expressed in his book: the zoning of different areas for different uses, good transport infrastructure with the railway station in the heart of the town centre, workers' housing situated away from the smoke and steam of the factories, but close enough for them to cycle or walk to work or to the town centre, and green spaces incorporated throughout with recreational spaces and an agricultural area surrounding the town. The exhibition here tells the story of the Garden Cities movement, but just across town we have an archive of objects that tell the history of the town, called the Garden City Collection.
We have over 80,000 items that tell the rich social history of Letchworth and the people that worked here. These include items that were made by Letchworth Industries, such as Marmot and K&L and the Spirella Corset Company. We have fine art that represents the artists of Letchworth, many beautiful arts and crafts plans of the buildings of Letchworth, and many thousands of photographs that tell the social history of the people that lived here, their clubs and societies, and things that they did in their spare time. The collection also represents the Garden City movement. We have the archive of First Garden City Limited and its successors, and we have researchers from around the world who come to look at this archive and our extensive collection of library books, which tell the story of Letchworth, of course, and also the places that it influenced.
The success of Letchworth Garden City saw the idea spread, with garden suburbs in almost every city in the country, most notably at Hampstead in London. There followed a second garden city at Welwyn, and ultimately the post-war new towns. The influence of garden cities spread around the entire world, with garden suburbs or industrial planned towns in continental Europe, North America, Australia, Japan, and more. Ebenezer Howard's vision is alive and well here in Letchworth Garden City, with its unique reinvestment model and the success of the planning of the town. The world's first garden city looks to the future in good shape and with a sense of real pride in its rich history.
Okay, these are some of the principles. I won't go through them because time flees. But the history is interesting because two-thirds of the income came from selling leases for houses and the annual ground rent from those houses, and a third of it was commercial space, so they got rents from those leases. And there was a reform by the Labour government in the 1960s giving the leaseholders, the householders, the right to buy their lease out. So the income of Letchworth Garden City went down considerably, and it's now about 7 or 8 million. The commercial leases continue, and also the farms around that they still owned continue. So one of the learnings from that is be very, very careful of what the politicians are doing and the legislative environment, because that is quite crucial for the success and also the tax system. However, that leads into the discussion. We've talked to summarise, just an overview of community land trusts, the societal challenges we face. How do we build a cooperative Commonwealth society, of which housing's a key element? The why, the what and how of community land trusts, Scottish land reform movement, Letchworth Garden City, which all the principles thereof, and I just missed one, haven't I? No. There's one thing missing, and I'm very sorry. But Stroud Common Wealth has been working on to try to develop a proposal for a railway-connected development corporation for a number of railway stations in Gloucestershire, because we have to build new housing and new settlements. And so we've proposed a paper to the various tiers of local government and national government, trying to interest them in a kind of rail-connected series of garden city settlements, including 2 in and around Stroud. So watch this space. So thank you. Sorry, Nina.
No problem. I would just like to give you first a big applaud. And then I would like to say that let's keep those questions here, and we will have a panel just after the short break. And we can discuss those questions during the panel, but of course also questions from the audience. And I would like to say that we will take a break for 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes we will be back, and then we will have the panel here until 20 minutes past 7. So we will have time to discuss the questions that both the audience has, but also the questions here on the board. So please be back in 10 minutes, and that means that in 8 minutes I will be calling you. So also for the people watching us online, you can have a short break and we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Wires.
Good technology. Thank you very much for doing the films. It worked perfectly. So helpful. All right, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Will you be needing your glasses?
Perhaps. Thanks very much. Thank you.
So, my friends, we have now had a short brief. People being here in Gothenburg have been able to take a little snack or a cup of tea and coffee. I hope the people joining us at home has also been taking something small to eat. This was so interesting, Martin, and I have hundreds of questions, but I will not post them now because I think that now it will be time for the audience and also the panel. But before we pose questions, I would like to introduce the panel. Jonas, we heard a little bit about your text about community land trust, and you presented it this lunch, and you can find it on the website of Coompanion. And you are also working at Coompanion Östergötland, and you have been working with housing questions in over 10 years. And you have done a study circle for bygg- and bogemenskaper or community-led housing or Baugemeinschafts. And also you did write this report, which is also very interesting here tonight, because this is also a very, I would say, concrete version of what you write about in the report that we have been hearing Martin say. We also tonight have Jack Vahnberg with us. You are a member of Exploateringsnämnden in the city of Gothenburg for the Left Party. But also you are working on a doctorate at the University of Malmö in urban studies. And there you are researching about energy and housing inequality. So thank you for being here tonight, Jack. And also we have Andreas here. And Andreas, you have already said welcome to us, but you are also now a part of the panel because you are a political strategist here at the Swedish Union of Tenants.
And apparently tech guy.
Yes, and also the tech guy. You are here in two very important roles tonight. And thank you for being a part of this panel. So we do have some questions from you, Martin, about how we can work with these wonderful ideas here in Sweden. We have them behind us, but I will also let the audience here pose questions if you have any. And if you have a question, just raise your hand and I will go with the mic. If not, I will start to say one of the questions that you have behind you so you don't have to read it. I think I would like any of you in the panel to answer the question, what struck you as significant and useful of what you heard Martin saying tonight? Maybe Jonas would like to do the first answer, but it's open for everyone.
I'm very inspired by the last thing you mentioned, creating a company to create garden city, what was it called?
Rail connected, linear along different stations in Gloucestershire.
Exactly. Settlements, garden city settlements was the term, I think.
Yeah.
So you create garden city settlements along the railroad to catch the land value, because railroads will uplift the land values. So, for example, the West Link, perhaps, and other, and in Östergötland we have the East Link. So there are,
So, Jack, please go on.
Yes, thank you very much for this very interesting. Is this one on? Yeah,
yes,
working. Okay, good. For this very interesting presentation, I was struck a little bit about the political risk that came up a little bit at the end. That there was a regulatory change where we sold off a lot of the leases, and clearly like a deregulation that was bad for the community land trust. And sort of we've seen some similar movements here in Sweden as well. Because the bostadsrätt originally was quite similar to this. You even talked a little bit at the beginning that we do have community-based housing or collaborative housing it's just not really working like that today, because we have successfully deregulated that again and again several times. And now we're standing here sort of like, okay, what do we do with a market that has sort of left that ideal, at least to some degree, and sort of like taking the next step and getting back there, I think is the big question for us now.
Is there research clarity about the effects of these changes?
Sorry,
Have people been researching the effects of these changes and the consequences for public policy?
So like the big problem, if I speak from the research perspective rather than from the political perspective, the big problem here is that we've gotten a market with very high prices. Because there's two big deregulations that have been done to the collaborative housing market. Partly we took away the price caps, so they were very tightly regulated at one part, and then we deregulated the banking sector, letting more and more people loan more and more money, pushing up the prices. Now we're probably about to do that again, and of course again then driving up the prices, which is hitting a lot of households. A lot of people coming from a background without parents that could lend them money for the first apartment are having a lot of big issues. From the political side then, if I'm going to switch to that hat, we see that we should increase the rental sector and the publicly owned rental sector to a large degree. So those are like the two sort of perspectives on it.
So the prices go up, the banks benefit because they give higher mortgages, and that investment is denied to normal industry, and you know, and everybody loses because people have to work harder to pay higher mortgages. So it's a lose-lose system, and I'm not enough of a land economist to understand how land is a monopoly, isn't it? It's the monopoly of all monopolies, and I just don't think there's the understanding of how this deregulation is a lose-lose situation. You know, and I don't know if there's any researchers who've gone into that. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you, Martin. I think Andreas has another question, or do you have an answer?
Maybe not an answer, but a reflection. There's only one thing that is more sacred than religion, and that's the property rights. I would say, even in Sweden. And to continue where Jack stopped, we also have had interest rates at nothing for a couple of years, for a decade, almost a decade. So now the land prices are impossible to do something about for normal people. This suggestion to co-own land is a bit of a odd bird, udda fågel, I don't know, in the Swedish context, because we're used to municipal land owning, and that's our model. So these two models are crashing a bit, but it's interesting. And what I take from your lecture is the enthusiasm, and also from the earlier lecture today at the lunch is the enthusiasm amongst this community who work with these questions. It's very it's very engaging to see.
It's a strength, though, isn't it, municipal land ownership, as long as the politicians and civil servants are not captured themselves by neoliberal economic ideology. And it's that sort of capture that leads to sell-off. And, for example, Britain is a test base for neoliberal capitalism. Much of our water's been sold off, our electricity, our utilities, our rail system, our telephones, and we now have to buy it back at much higher prices. And in the case of water, we need citizen water scientists all over the country to test our water, because the government regulator, the Environment Commission, doesn't have the staff to monitor water quality. And Thames Water was for years run by Macquarie Bank, which was a bank for millionaires. And so we had civil servants and politicians who believed that public was bad and private was good, and they gave huge handouts. So that's so it's a real strength that Stockholm City owns much of its land. But if it would only respect the Duke of Westminster principle and hang on to it, and if you do have a community land trust or whatever scheme, then Stockholm City can keep the freehold of the land, but lease it on conditions to the whichever body it is. So it's a win-win solution, because it's great, you know. But I'm worried about the change of values and ideology. You know, it's a lens we see the world through, isn't it? Yeah.
And thank you, Martin, because I think you have borrowed us your eyes tonight, and we see other possibilities. And I would like to connect to Swedish questions now to the panel, because I can see that we have a possibility now today in Sweden, because we have the EU who has done an affordable housing plan. Now, it just came in December. And we in Sweden need to think about how can we do affordable housing in Sweden. We don't have social housing, but we need to do affordable housing. Also, we see that we have this kind of problems now in the society. For example, people do not want to have kids because they don't know if they can have a good place to live. So would one of you in the panel try to think about a good solution? How can we take this plan together with Martin's idea and propose something that we could do in Sweden? Yeah. Andreas, I saw you raise.
Yeah, the tenant unions, the Swedish tenant union, have a couple of ideas for how we should do, and one of the ideas is based in the earlier conclusion that we had, that the housing issue is not a private issue. It's a how do you say?
Public issue.
Yeah, it's a public issue. Thank you. And if there's a public issue, there have to be public solutions. So our solution is that the state, not the municipal society, and not on a regional level, not on in private, the state, the state of Sweden, have to solve this issue for the people. And our model is pretty easy. It's based on that the state borrows money on the market and loans it further down, and preferably to projects in garden cities. Absolutely, but the model that the state is taking the responsibility is the key.
Yeah.
That is one possibility, of course, but if you compare to what we have heard today, that is a little bit more from the upside.
Yep.
So what could the possibilities be in doing it from the other side? Jack, the word is yours.
Yes, I mean, of course, we also at the Left Party really like state-based solutions. We're not afraid of that. But on a more municipal level, something that we want to see moving forward is less of this selling off land and more of the municipality keeping land, just like Martin was onto, and leasing out for different options. I really think there's a lot of ways of going there forwards. Something that we think is positive as well as giving these types of leases or currently selling them to specific projects of specific types. So in our current budget, we do have that we want to lease it out to byggemenskapen or sell it to byggemenskapen. I think that's a big way moving forward of doing the sort of local type move. Even if we also should do a lot of state-based policies, of course.
Lease to what, Andrea? Jake? Lease to what?
Byggemenskapen, which I think is
building communities.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, thank you for that, Jack. I think you also have another idea, because I have read your report, Jonas. I know that you have this kind of, you would like to try out, like Martin said, let's try out, let's do a couple of pilots. And you have this idea about stiftelser.
Oh, yeah.
So would you like to present that? No, I know it's not yours, but you are presenting it in the report, of course.
We have an opportunity in the law to make markstiftelser, land trusts, tomträttsstiftelser. So you can create a trust and you use the tomträtt law via the trust, but the government needs to approve it. So the government could do it, or maybe somebody else, and the government will approve it. So then we could start, creating a community land trust, land communities using tomträttsstiftelser. So yeah, it's a good idea, and if the government could fund it, it would be even better with a land fund like in Scotland, perhaps. Who knows?
So it could be funded by the state.
Yeah.
But I think that it's very important to not only think that the state could resolve everything, because
Sure.
also money is a little bit hard all over the system. But as we could hear about Martin's example, there is money in the community, in the place where people live. So I think maybe thinking both up and down would be very good in this moment.
We have famous actors in Sweden as well, like Daniel Craig's, and we have those kind of people here as well.
Yeah. But I think the thing is about trust is that if you want to put money into something, you need to know that it's there for a long time.
Yeah.
I think that is the important thing.
Yeah.
Now we have a question from the audience. Would it be okay for me to put it in now, or you would like to add something? Any of you?
Now I just want to say that it's the land trust tool prohibits politicians to sell land. So I mean, it's an important message.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. I also have thousands of questions, but my name is Patrick Zapata. I'm a public administration scholar, and I was just thinking about what you heard right now, what you talked about right now, but also what Martin mentioned earlier, the tension between property and land. And isn't one of the things, at least in the Swedish cities, that the municipalities have been selling off the houses but not the land, and that's also kind of a problem with when you lease out the right to have a property or a house on the land, but not the land, so you can't really do anything. I mean, you also want to live outside the house sometimes, a garden, or how do you want to have it around the direct environment? Of course, it makes it easier to buy it back, but do we see that happening, or how is that connection? At least in the center of the cities, you have the house and the association owns it, maybe, and you can't really do anything outside the house.
So who would like to answer that question? Yes, Jack.
Well, at least in Gothenburg, there's been quite a long tradition of selling off quite a lot of land, at least in recent years. So most of the large new constructions or construction of new housing, the city sells off the land outright. Now, there has been earlier and further back in history where there's been a lot of leasing of different types, and there's definitely been some conflict around that. I think the way moving forward there is having more of the different types of leases, tomträtt and arrende, but trying to get them as long as possible to then also make people or organizations that do construct or do make new housing or other projects have the confidence to do things with that land, while still remaining within like the public or democratic ownership. That doesn't necessarily tie out the knot of what we've already done, but I think that's the way that at least we see it moving forwards.
Thank you, Jack. So, Martin, would you like to add something?
No.
So then I will continue with the questions that you did pose. I think they are really good because it's also about the relevance of what you have been telling us tonight in Sweden. I would like to ask any of you, how could we go back to the future? What Swedish community land traditions and examples are there to learn from and build on? Do any one of you have a good idea about that? Yes, Jonas.
Okay, we have two things that I know about. We have fideikommiss, which is the feudal form of a community land trust. It's basically how the feudalism worked in Sweden before. One noble family owned land forever, basically. But we don't want to do that. We just do the same, but we have land communities instead. So, and the other one is the local savings banks. Actually, the local savings bank lend out to property purchases locally, and they took in the rent and they gave it back to the local community in various ways. So that is a land value capture scheme, actually. Yeah. So the community land trust is basically a sibling to the local savings bank.
Thank you, Jonas. Would anyone like to add something? Otherwise, I have. Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
This is maybe less specifically like land tradition, but when I think back to the future, I think about the strong and large publicly owned housing that we had in Sweden, and that we've sold off to a large extent. A large public housing sector that also was norm setting for the rental market in general. Because that not only pushes down rental prices in general, but also makes it easier if in the sector of housing where you do buy your house. That's what I would want to go back to or learn from if we're moving forward.
That's very interesting, but I would like to add a little bit of a reflection on that. We have also been served with housing, really good housing here in Sweden for a long time. It wasn't really good end of the century, beginning of the century. And then all the cooperatives started. And we have a little bit the same situation now, but we haven't understood it. So I would like us to learn from all the good examples of Martin. And I really think we need now to look at other countries, because they have been working with this for a long time, because we haven't had housing served by the state. So if we look at Germany or Holland or England, there we have really good things to learn from, because I think that, of course, it's super important with public housing, and we should do everything we can to keep it. But I would like to say that it's not enough, and that's what all the statistics show now. We don't have enough with affordable housing in Sweden, and this is really a problem for elderly, for young people, but also for ordinary families. So I really think that it's a good moment now to also think a little bit about what other countries do.
Yeah.
Saying that, I would like to read what you said. Challenges you face when planning for the future, Martin. You wanted us to reflect upon that. Does anyone of you want to say something about that?
One more time.
What kind of challenges are we facing here in Sweden when planning for the future?
The
if
housing
we want the housing,
future.
it's a kind of the discussion we are doing right now, but a little bit. What can we see? What are the challenges? I know a big one, but I would like you to say your ideas.
Okay, rising property values, because it makes housing unaffordable. So until it stops rising, maybe it goes down like this, you know. Before that, we will have a problem, and after that, during the down phase, we will have a problem. Afterwards, maybe we can start over again, buying properties and do something. Yeah. So that's a challenge.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Andreas, would you like to add a challenge?
Yeah, one more challenge is that the the communities own so various much of their own lands. Here in Gothenburg, the city owns quite a lot of its own land. But if you travel like 10 kilometers south to Kungsbacka, they don't own any of their lands. It's all kind of landlords and dukes and whatnot who owns the land. So it's there are very different sets of rules on local level.
Would you like to add something also, Jack?
Yes, and it's maybe an aspect that we haven't talked too much about today. But I mean, a lot of the housing that we need is already built, and we have to do something with it. A lot of the housing we need to renovate. A lot of the housing is underutilized today, and facing that challenge, and also how we then share that, because a lot of it, of course, is in private hands and is not used fairly or used particularly well. I think that's one of the big challenges moving forward, making sure we use our stock in a reasonable way.
I think that is a very good thing to emphasize. So thank you for that, Jack. And we could see, for example, in Holland, they are rebuilding 10,000 homes from offices. And looking out around here, I think we will have some offices that are empty quite soon, also in Gothenburg and Malmö and Stockholm. So that is also the existing stock. And how can we work with that? Maybe not too reactive, but rather proactive would be a really good thing, I think, for the municipalities. So I would like to add the challenge that we have a very large scale building sector that has been earning a lot of money on housing the last 10 years. And I think that those solutions are more small scale, and it's not that it's not possible for building actors to build, but the big money is not, I'm sorry to say, Martin, but in your wonderful projects, it's of course local carpenters that own money, but it's not the big money. So that's, I think, is also a big challenge in Sweden, because we have big companies here, and the municipalities are a little bit weak in many cases, especially in the countryside.
Yeah.
So we do now time is out, but I would like to ask if I could pose the last question to Martin. Would that be okay? I see a little bit of nodding here. So anyone who's online can go. So we will just for the last 5 minutes. I would like to ask you, Martin, but of course also the rest of the people in the panel. How might community-led housing and community land stewardship and garden city principles help address those challenges that we have been talking about today?
Oh, how long do we have?
We only have 5 more minutes.
You could have a conference next year on that,
Yeah.
on these questions, couldn't you? Now, just a reflection. You're a very modernist society, aren't you? There used to be this block in Stockholm where all the architects of modern Sweden used to live. Politicians, sociologists. And it was said that if there was a fire there, you know, the project would stop, you know. And now I see you're in a postmodern phase. You know, you've had the duopoly of state and market, and you've kept out civil society, you know, largely, although there are lots of good, wonderful civil society associations like the tenants, your tenants union. So I think it's up to the you know, that this municipalities have the land. They could be researching the benefits. Actually, that you need to prove the benefits of these smaller housing schemes, particularly if they address areas of need. Yeah, particularly either in the countryside or urban areas. And you've got urban sociologists here, you know, and commoning people that know about commoning. So in this room, you've got a whole think tank of people who you know, can help with this. So I think much more variety, and perhaps one local authority that will pioneer this successfully, so it's well researched, and the others will follow, because people learn by example, don't they?
I think that was so good. And also reading the affordable housing plan, they are talking about this kind of pilots. We need to do pilots to see that we can have affordable housing in long term.
Yeah.
So I think this suggestion was just great, and I will take it with me. And I would also like to invite Andreas or Jonas or Jack to say something as last words. You will also...
Could I just say before they say something, and also researching, because sometimes you have a pilot, and you oh, that went well, but you don't research it, and you don't spread the learning and the benefits. Like Fort Hall Farm, my colleague Greg and I did that work, and now it's a meme, you know. But it was Cooperatives UK who said, you can't do community shares. But we just did, you know. We raised 800,000. And so they then researched it, and the strengths and weaknesses, and they spread the learning. Yeah? So enthusiasm will only get you so far.
And I do agree, and this is also what we see in a lot of different projects. We could, for example, just go to Holland and see that this is exactly what they have done there. They are right now working a lot with community-led housing, and in combination with civil society and research. So thank you so much for this, Martin. No, we will talk afterwards, because we will have dinner. But if anyone in the panel would like to add something, I would like to invite you.
Yeah, I can start. Finishing words. I think you asked earlier if there are that the development must come from below as a grassroots organization, or as a grassroots initiative, and there are lots of initiatives. Everyone who says that there are not engagement out there is not right, because there are. We see it every day. So there are no lack of engagement. Yeah.
I do agree. And maybe Jack?
Yes, I just thought I'd say two things that I'm going to bring with from this discussion from the seminar, and partly like this big importance of keeping land within the community, within the municipality, and then leasing it out for long terms, or using it either for, public housing that we're a big proponent for, or for the more community-driven and civil society-based projects as a way of moving forward here for more housing. So thanks for all this. Thanks, very interesting.
Yeah, and I'm inspired by the regenerative farms you have in the Stroud Community Land Trust. I mean, I would like to see a lot of more small regenerative farms in Sweden. Unfortunately, it's a bit difficult because if we created a land trust, it would most probably not be able to buy a farm because it's difficult due to the jordförvärvslagen. So it would be very good if we could look into that a bit more.
Yes, I do agree. I would just like to add something to you, Martin, about Sweden. We are right now working a lot with the garden city. It could be good, it could be bad. I think that what we have been talking tonight, it's not a big part of the discussion, but I think it needs to be. And I listened to a really good professor up in Stockholm in November. His name is Claes Kaldenby. And he said that if we do a garden city without this kind of land capture model, then it's not a garden city. And I think that what he said then is what you pointed out today. So I think this was a great evening. We have learned so much. And I'm also happy to say that we filmed it. So we will be able to keep all this knowledge with us also for the future. So with that said, I would like us to give a big applause to Martin and the panel. Thank you so much.
And thanks, Tina. There is